Thank you, Hashem. The source of our learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. And it should be for Shleima for Yechiel Nassim ben Sarah and Aaron David Halevi ben Menucha Adel Esther. It's interesting. We got down Daf Yud Gimel, almost towards the bottom. But I have to speak out what we learned before, just to go back. Yeah, the discussion here is about when does grain get categorized as belonging to a certain year to be chayiv and meiser or shmita. When is it considered that it's shmita grain? So we said that, well, it's actually grain and olives.
Has to sprout, I think.
So we said misheviu shlish. When it grew a third. We said, where did we get that from? So we said regarding Shemitah, it says at the end of the 7th year, in the holiday, in the year of Shemitah, in the holiday of Sukkot, we said 1 second. That Sukkot is not going to be in the 7th year. That Sukkot is going to be in the 8th year. So we said, yeah, you're right. But because the grain grew a third in the 7th year, it's considered Shemitah grain, even though it was cut on Sukkot. We said, how do you know that it was a third? No, we didn't ask that right away. We asked first, maybe it means that not that the grain grew a third in the previous year. Maybe it means that Shemitah goes until Sukkot. That's the rule of Shemitah. Extends itself, so it doesn't end Rosh Hashanah.
So when it grows a third up until Sukkot?
No, maybe it means drop the concept of third.
Okay.
And just say that Shemitah goes from Rosh Hashanah the previous year till Sukkot the following year. Because it says, Shnasa Shemitah, Chag HaSukkot.
It's a sad thing, I don't know.
It's a devil's advocate. It's
right, yeah.
You know, who told you? So we say, we have another verse. It says regarding Sukkot, it says, so it's not telling me, the Gemara thinks right now, Chag HaAsif is not telling me the name of the holiday. Chag HaAsif means the time of gathering, right, which is Sukkot, and when you gather in your work. It says, well, that's repetitive. Time of gathering, when you gather in your work, it doesn't have to say that. You know what? It must mean that when it says a time of gathering, it means a time of harvesting, of reaping. It changes the translation. Asif means gathering, but here it's talking about like taking it off the ground. It means kutzer. What does that tell me? So it's telling me like this, that it's the holiday of, it's the time of harvesting, that when you harvest, what does it say? B'tzeis Hashanah. B'chag HaAsif b'tzeis Hashanah. It's when you harvest it on Sukkot, that's coming to tell me that it grew already in the b'tzeis Hashanah in the previous year. We're saying that it grew a third in the previous year.
Is that usually the custom is to harvest on like Chol HaMoed?
No, it's actually, what would you harvest then? I'm not sure. But if you harvest then, it would mean that it grew earlier, because that's the time of gathering in, not the time of harvesting.
The connection of Sukkot to harvesting is just the time of the year in which the Chag.
Harvesting is really before. It's done before the summer. This is after the summer. This is before the rain. Now after the summer, you bring it into the house to protect it.
I see. You
leave it out in the summer to dry.
So harvesting would be in the spring.
Harvesting would be in the spring, but it's saying that if it would have grown in Sukkot, it would have been a third before Rosh Hashanah. Then we discussed Reb Yirmiyah. Reb Yirmiyah challenges, how do the rabbis know what's a third or not? And Reb Zeretz tells him, don't mix in. You just stick to halacha. Don't like take your head out of the halacha. You're asking questions that you shouldn't be asking. Then Rabbi Yirmiyah says, actually, my question wasn't a question anyway, because we know that the rabbis can tell when it's a third, or that people can tell when it's a third, because when they came into the land of Israel, it says that they brought the Omer, and it had to have grown a third in their hands, not in the hands of the non-Jews. So it must be that they're able to tell. In other words, that it grew a quarter or a sixth before they harvested it, before they came to the land, and then it continued to grow a third in their hands. So the time that it reached the third was in the hands of the Jewish people.
So this was the first Omer.
The first Omer, yeah, when they came in the book of Yeshua, they came in, they brought the Omer. Okay, so he says we can.
Yeah, that part I didn't understand. They came in on the 10th of Nisan.
Right.
So they purchased the land, it grew a third to a third within those 5 days.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. So the Gemara says, how does it grow a third within those 5 days? It must be Eretz Tzvi, a land that's very quick. So
I just say it grew on the other side of the Jordan. It's also Eretz.
No. Oh, 1 second. Yeah, that's an interesting discussion, growing on the other side of the yard. And I forgot where I saw.
There's a comment here about that.
Yeah, that's an interesting discussion. The Gemara doesn't get into that. Why the Gemara doesn't get into that is the commentaries discuss. So whatever the case is, the Gemara says that Rabbi Yirmiyah, you don't really have much of a raya for this, because once you're telling me that it's Eretz Tzvi, the land that works very quick, so then maybe you planted the whole thing and it grew. How do you know that it's a third? Once you're telling me that it's like miraculous, then we don't have any. Okay. So we go back. Now we're looking back at. We're going to start from Maskefler Reb Chanina. Maskefler Reb Chanina. It's 6 lines from the bottom. Reb Chanina has a question on the original statement of how do we know that Shemitah is from Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Hashanah. And if it grew a third during the Shemitah and you harvest it on Sukkot, if you're harvesting it on Sukkot, that means that it had grown a third in the previous year.
So you do harvest on Sukkot.
If you would harvest on Sukkot, that means it would have grown a third. I don't know what types of things you would be harvesting on Sukkot, but it could be grapes you're harvesting on Sukkot. So it says, or olives maybe. The whole basis of this was because the word Asif was not the name of the holiday, Chag Asif, that's what the Gemara was thinking. I was thinking Chag Asif was just telling me the time of gathering, which it didn't need to tell me, so it must mean harvesting, which meant that you would harvest then because it had grown a third beforehand. Gemara says, but that's not true. Reb Chanina is asking. It says that when you gather from the wine press and from the olive press, and the master taught, that means there's a brisa, that we're dealing with the holiday of Sukkot, and we're talking about the schach, that what's eligible to be considered schach is something that grew from the ground and is detached from the ground, and it's not makabel tama. That those things that are left over on the wine press after when you're done, which means the stems and whatever, so that you can use for schach. In other words, that the pasuk isn't extra. It's coming to tell me the Chag HaAsif is the name. It's the Chag HaSukkos, which takes place at the time of gathering. Okay. Amar Reb Zera. And the whole basis of the limud was that the word Asif was extra. Now we're saying that the word Asif is not extra. So Amar Reb Zera Hamil Sahavi Biyadan V'Asar Reb Chanina Shada Bein Narga. We had a good pshat, Reb Zera says, but then Reb Chanina came along and messed it up. Shada Bein, in other words, he asked a strong question that says that the word Asif isn't really extra. And so therefore now we're left with no pshat. Elaminalan. So where do we know? We have to go back. Where do we know that growing a third is considered the time that will categorize, is considered the criteria that will categorize the grain? Kidatanya. We'll learn it from the following brisa. Rabbi Yonasan ben Yosef Aimer. Okay. It says, V'asa says atua l'shleish hashanim. Talking about the Shemitah and Yovel is a problem because you have 2 years in a row that you can't plant. So what are you going to eat? So it says that that it's going to grow for 3 years.
2 years?
For 3 years. The sixth, that will be enough for 3 years. The when you plant in the 6th year, that will be enough for the 6th, 7th, and 8th.
Well, the first 3, that's for the Orla, right?
No, but it's grain, so you don't have arla. We're talking about if you don't plow the field, so what are you going to eat the following year?
Shemitah years.
Is the 7th, yeah?
7th year.
And then in the 8th year, you have Yovel,
Oh,
right? So it says that you'll have that Hashem will give his blessing. L'shleish hashanim. Now the Gemara says, "Al tikri l'shleish ela l'shlish." It says that the tua will grow.
oh, I see. So you have a Yovel and a Shemitah year back to back.
Right.
It could fall out that way. So what about the 3rd year?
In the 3rd year, you didn't plant in the previous year,
Okay.
so you still need food for that. So you need for the 1st year.
Oh wow, what a
So it's going to give you grain for 3 years straight. The Gemara is a limit here. It says l'shleish. We're going to read it as l'shlish, a third. That means that when the grain grows a third, that's considered that it has grown. I'll take l'shleish el l'shlish. The Gemara says 1 second, but wasn't that a significant pasuk? You can't just take a significant pasuk and tell me that we'll read it differently when that pasuk was necessary. That's a very significant pasuk. It's telling me about the blessing that we'll have when we keep the Shemitah. So it says, no, for that, ksiv krachrina, we actually have another pasuk. It says, Zratem es hashana shminis, v'chaltem es hatvua yashan ad shana hatshias. This is not the Yovel. This is talking about regular Shemitah. You'll plant in the 8th year, and you'll still be eating the old grain until the 9th year. Okay.
So wait, for the Yovel year, do you have to leave your field fallow also?
Yeah.
Or?
Yeah. In the 8th year, regular 8th year, you can plant. Yeah, I'm not sure if it's referring to Yovel or if it's just we need 3 years anyway, because you don't plant in the 7th. So what are you going to have in the 8th?
A Shemitah year and then a following Yovel, that's awesome.
Of keeping it, right?
Yeah. Wow.
Normally, a crop is good enough for 1 year, good enough for 3 years.
So the pasuk would mean va'asas satvua l'shleish hashanim means l'shlish hashanim, which means like this, that the tvua, the grain that had grown a third in the 6th year, even though it's ready in the 7th year, that's going to be considered 6th year grain, and you're going to be able to eat it as regular food in the 7th year because it had grown a third beforehand. You follow? Yeah, you can pick it as your own. It's not Shemitah grain, right? Okay.
Machal ben Drusai is also a third, right?
Yeah, that's
Not
my
first.
what it
Oh.
is. Like it's Rashi and the Rambam. Yeah. Right. A third or a half. Okay. Okay, now we have a new discussion here. Did I read the pasuk? Except he said we have another pasuk that tells me that you'll have for 3 years. So therefore, this pasuk we don't need, and this is coming to tell me that if it grew a third in the 6th year, it's considered 6th year, not 7th year. Tanan Hassam. We learned in the mission over there. Ha'ires, which is usually translated as rice. It even has the English word in there, rice. Ba'adaychen, it's usually translated as millet. Ba'hapragin, I don't know what that is. Any translations over there?
Poppy.
Oh, poppy. Okay. Mun. Right. That's the mun tashin. That's the which we transformed into haman tashin. Bashim shemin is sesame. In French, Rashi says what pragan is maku. Sesames sheheshvisha lifnei Rosh Hashanah. They took root. This is not grown a third. This is just took root into the ground. Misashin l'sha'avaru matarim b'shvius. If it's the 6th year, and it took root in the 6th year, even though all of its growth after that was in the 7th year, we considered it 6th year grain, and it's not Shemitah food because it took root beforehand. So this is a different qualification. Yeah, there's different standard. Yeah, with these.
Does it depend on the plant or?
Yeah, v'im lav. And if it didn't take root before Rosh Hashanah, then asurin b'shvius misasin l'shana haba. If it's the Shemitah year, then it's considered Shemitah because it took root only afterwards and on the Shemitah. And if it's not the Shemitah year, then the Meiser would be the following year because that's when it took root, which depending on 1 and 2 had a certain Meiser and 3 had a certain Meiser, a different Meiser. And also we're not supposed to mix years of Meiser. We're supposed to do every year separately.
Will it go into how it derived this Sarah from?
Oh, so we'll see. Yeah. This is rabbinic Meiser. And because the real Meiser is only grain, wine, and oil. So the rabbis can set standards however they like. And there's a special reason for this, but okay. Amar Rabba. Rabba says, Amar Rabbana, he's really asking a question, but he's introducing it with his statement. The rabbis have said, Ilan Basar Chanata. When do you determine which year the fruit belongs to? By when it blossoms, when it buds, when the blossoms fall off, I guess, and then you're left with the bud. Tavua bezesim basar shlish. Grain and olives was when it grew a third. Yerek basar lakita. Vegetables are when you pick them. Hani kaman shavina rabbanan. Where do you come up with this one? Hani, these, kaman, like who? Like which one of those types? Shavina rabbanan, did the rabbis make it? Because we know there's 3 types. Now you're telling me a fourth that has to do with taking root that we never saw in any of our learning. Where's this from? Hadamar Rabba. Rabba says, Mitoich shasuyin prachim prachim. Yeah, I'm not sure what the word prachim means. Maybe it means split or something, but because it's made in small amounts, that's the context of it.
In English, they say harvested a few at a time.
A few at a time, okay. The dictionary prach gesture didn't have this quote, but he just said like split or broken. I guess it means that they take it off and they prepare it, small amounts. So Azli Rabban and Basar Rasha. See, we had a problem over here. If we're going to go after any of the other times, if we go after Lakita, let's say, like it would be a vegetable, so then we would never get it correct because you only harvest a little bit at a time. You know, it's like spices. You don't go out and cut all your spices down. You cut a few leaves off as what you need for your dish. And then you go out and need a little bit more because you're cooking something else. It's not like you take in your crop. That's the idea of it, is that it grows a little bit and you use it as it grows.
Yeah, spices don't really rot, so to speak.
Well, they'll continue to grow. So you take off a little bit. Okay. So here, it's not necessarily that it continues to grow, but in the production of it, you do just a little bit at a time. If that's the case, when it comes to Meiser, you're going to have this huge confusion because you took off a little here, a little there. This one was before Rosh Hashanah, that one was after Rosh Hashanah. You won't get it accurate. So they said, you know what? The planting of it is all equal. That you all plant at the same time. So when does it take root? That's equal. So because the rabbis are allowed, they made up that there's Meiser here. So they'll, right, because it's not a biblical Meiser. So they're also going to tell us what the standard is of when it's going to be qualified in that year. So they said with this, it has to do with take root to make it easier on the, make it all even.
And the type of Meiser this is referring to is what again?
It would be Meiser for the Levi. Yeah.
But what's the
Meiserishan, we call it.
Meiser?
Yeah. Amalei Abaya. Abaya says, I have another solution. You're telling me about a problem of not being able to calculate which one goes with which year. I have a solution for you. V'yitzbar garna l'teichai v'nimtzatayrim min hachadash shabai al hachadash shabai min hayashan shabai al yashan shabai. He has a very interesting solution. He says, what's your problem? Mix it all evenly and then take a cup of it, and the ratio of the Meiser the ratio in that cup will be whatever proportion it is. Let's say it's 50-50 from last year, 50 from this year. That's what you'll find in that cup. And you'll say, this is Meiser on that. That means half of it will be Meiser for this and half will be Meiser for that because you mixed it evenly. So why are you telling me that I have to change the standard of when it's considered, when it's categorized in which year? I could take everything, put it all together, mix it evenly, and take it out in the same ratio that I have in the pile, I'll have in that cup, and it will be Meiser, right? It'll be a tenth of this, and it'll be a tenth of that. That's a big assumption. Milay Tanya. Yeah, very good. Very good. Very good. Yeah. The Gemara is going to mention that shortly. Milay Tanya was not taught in a Brisa. Rabbi Yosi ben Kippur Reimer Mishim Reb Shimon Shazuri. Rabbi Yosi ben Kippur, he says in the name of Reb Shimon Shazuri, Pula Mitzri, some sort of Egyptian bean. Shazaru Lazera. Apparently this bean, I'm not sure exactly. I didn't look in the Steinsaltz comments there. But apparently what I'm seeing from Rashi is that it's possible to eat the seeds and it's possible to eat the leaves. So I could consider it a grain or I can consider it a vegetable, depending on what my intention is when I'm planting it. You know, so there's two parts to this. Yeah. A cowpea. Uh-huh. Is that what it says? And is there any comment over there? What do you need? Want a Gemara? Oh, they must have put the Gemara somewhere. They're down here. Those are the tiniest. They put them down there. Pula Mitzri. They're just going to say Pula Mitzri. Yeah. I mean, give it.
Oh, Calvin. Some identify this as a Calvin.
Now, what is the significance of a cowpea? That it has two parts to it. Okay, so here we're saying Shazara Lazera. You planted it for the seed. That means that if it's kitnius, then we're going to go basar. If it's a legume for the seed, we're going to consider it a pea, and we're going to follow when it took root. If it would be a vegetable, we would follow when we pick it. But because it's a legume, we're going to follow when it took root. So it says, Rosh Hashanah. I'm sorry, Rosh Hashanah. Part of it took root before Rosh Hashanah. And Rosh Hashanah. And part of it took root after Rosh Hashanah. That's our problem, right? This is what we were discussing. So ein termin meisin mizel zeh lefi shein termin meisin leimen achadash ala yashon leimen yashon ala chadash. You can't take Meiser one from the other. Here, he messed up the solution. We were saying that planting it, taking root was all done equally. So you don't have the problem of picking small batches. Here, he planted it half before, half after. Now he's all confused. So what do you do? What should he do? You pile the whole collection into what you have. The ratio, the proportion will be the same in what you take out as meiser as what you have in the pile. See, Abaye is telling Rabbah that Rabbah came up with the explanation of why we want to follow when it takes root is because otherwise we'll be stuck without a possible solution of how to take meiser. Abaye says, I have a solution. Reb Shimon Shizuri gave us a solution for Pula Mitzri, that the proportion would be the same. Amalei, so Rabbah says back, Rabbah's the teacher of Abaye. Reb Shimon Shizuri Kamrit, you're telling me Reb Shimon Shizuri? Reb Shimon Shizuri Savri Yesh Bila, Rabbanan Savri and Bila, like Naftali told us. It's a big assumption here to say that it's going to mix evenly. Reb Shimon Shizuri holds that you can take that assumption that it's going to mix evenly. The Rabbanan don't hold that you're going to mix, it's going to mix evenly, and that's not a solution. So the only solution that we have is that we'll follow when it was planted and when it took root, which is maybe 3 days later or something. And that will be, if it was before Rosh Hashanah, it's all before Rosh Hashanah. It's after, then it's after.
Well, isn't the whole Shemitah Derabanan?
You see, when we're talking about Meiser, I get why it's Derabanan.
Oh,
What about the Shemitah? We're going to consider it Shemitah also. That's interesting. Let me see what it says. Yeah, Rashi spoke that out. No, it says but he ignores the Shemitah aspect.
That makes sense.
Yeah, this must be a Taisvis. Betema, very good. Jonathan, Taisvis question. Where's the trophies? Betema, Taisvis asks. I get it with Meiser, but Shvius is the Raisa. How can the rabbis switch that? They don't have the rights to just make it up because it's going to be easier. V'shema Shvius bizmanazeh. Maybe it's Shvius nowadays. And I guess that means that it would be the Rabbanan. Okay, interesting. Yeah, you have to come up with something. Okay, so Amar, now we say, so we're left with that we set a standard that would be convenient because of the complications, and don't tell me the solution about using the same proportion, because that's only Reb Shimon Shizuri's opinion. Amar Reb Yitzchak bar Nachmani, Amar Shmuel. Reb Yitzchak bar Nachmani says the name of Shmuel. There's all discussion over here in Taisvis. If it's Reb Shmuel bar Nachmani, if it's the name of Reb Yonasan, and all types of things, but this seems to be the correct girsa. Halacha ka Reb Yossi ben Kippur Sham Mishum Reb Shimon Shizuri. The halacha is like Reb Shimon Shizuri, that we accept that it mixes equally. Even you want to mix it up. Yeah. Maskefla Reb Zera. Reb Zera has a question. Shmuel Hachi. Did Shmuel really say that? Looks like Reb Shimon Shizuri that you can mix a salad and not. It's not. You see, there's a discussion in what is it, Simon Kuftes. There's a difference between liquids and solids. It's called Taruvas Lach Balach and Taruvas Yavish Biyavish and Smicha. I don't know if you remember these things. There's a solid mixture and a liquid mixture. A solid mixture doesn't really mix. It's mixed up in your mind. I have 3 pieces of meat. One of them is not kosher. That's called the taruvas yavish biyavish, the dry things. They're not mixed. They're each in a package, possibly. Just no label on it. So it's the confusion is up here, not in there. And then there's teruvas lach balach, where I had a liquid that mixed in. It's a real mixture. It's not mixed here. It's mixed in the pot. So then in Siman Kuf Tes, there's a discussion. What about the two types of flour? That it's yavish biyavish, or small beans or something. They're dry. It didn't mix, but it's not mixed in my head. It's mixed in the pan, in the container. So it's like it has qualities of both. It's a taruvas yavish biyavish, but it has a mixture, the type of lach balach mixture. So that's a discussion how to view that. Now over here,
You can say same thing with liquid, right? You can have liquids that don't really mix.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you could separate it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's it doing?
He says in liquids also you can have liquids that don't mix, like water and oil, right? Is that acceptable? That's an interesting question. If you have grease that falls into your milk, can you put it in the fridge? Chicken grease, meat grease. Can you put it in the fridge and just scoop it up? After it could be. So Reb Zera's question is, how could you say that Shmuel paskins like Reb Shimon Shazuri that you accept a mixture of solids? Shmuel only accepts it when it comes to wine and oil, that it mixes equally. Yeah, it's all discussion about the Chabad mikveh. You're familiar with the Chabad mikveh? There's like the hole in the bottom. So the claim is that the water on the bottom would be cool, and the water on the top would be warm because you're heating it, and it will last much longer. The reservoir of rain, which is on the bottom, will last much longer because that water doesn't mix. So they came up with there were a lot of shilas on this. Everyone has like different claims. So one of them was that the mineral water is coming from the water is the city water. It has minerals in it. It's heavier. So as much as you're going to tell me that the cold and hot waters don't mix, but the minerals in it are heavier, it's going to fall in. And they even did a test. They tested the water on the bottom, and it has the minerals that are from the city water. Yeah. And the answer to that was that the minerals dropping does not mean that the water mixed.
There's a certain amount of rainwater that you need,
Yeah, you need 40 of rainwater. So we keep that in a reservoir.
and the rest can be.
That's going to be city water. And we just
Oh.
have it. Okay, so the liquids for Toiveling, like kalim, usually Toiveling kalim is just rainwater because they never need to change it. They just throw in.
It's a ratio then.
They throw in chlorine every once in a while when it turns green. It's like the pool. They don't change the pool. You know what I'm saying? They just, and then you put the thing and wash your hands out.
Yeah.
But for people, they change the water. They do change the water, so they need a reservoir of rain. Okay, so the Gemara says, so there's a contradiction. Shmuel passing like Reb Shimon Shazuri, he doesn't pass like Reb Shimon. He says that only wine and oil mix equally, nothing but not solids. The Gemara says say that Reb Zera, when he asked the question, he forgot. Very interesting comment here. When Shmuel says that he's passing like Reb Shimon Shazuri, he didn't mean that everything mixes. Reb Shimon Shazuri said that just ignore your problems, ignore the problem, mix it all together, and just take meiser, and everything is going to be fine because the ratio is going to be the same. Shmuel says the same thing. Ignore the problem, put it all in, and it's going to be, and take meiser, and there's going to be no problem. But he didn't mean the reason that Reb Shimon Shazuri meant. He meant the reason is that when does it ripen? We had a problem that it took root before and it took root after, and it's a confusion. But when did it ripen? When was it Gemar Peri? When was it?
At the same time.
That was at the same time. So Shmuel Taka says that we go like Reb Shimon Shizuri, he meant don't worry about that issue, but he didn't mean that it's because it mixes. He meant because you go after Gemar Peri, and that's a separate statement that he says. Now it turns out that we have three statements from Shmuel. We have a halacha Reb Shimon Shizuri. We have lakol ein bila, nothing mixes except for wine and oil, and then we have that everything goes after Gemar Peri by these items, the items that we're talking about. But I need all of those. I couldn't have just said one of them. You see, we're asking, just say Akol Helachacha Gemar Peri and drop the halacha Reb Shimon Shizuri. Why do you need to say that? And you have the same point. So he says, no, everything is necessary. If he would have said halacha is like Reb Shimon Shizuri, then you would be left with a misunderstanding of Hava Mina Mishum de Kasava Yesh Bila. I would think that he holds that things mix. And you could rely on an equal mixture. So he has to tell me the other statement that he holds that it doesn't actually mix. If he would tell me that it doesn't mix, I would have thought that he's going to have that problem that the Rabbanan came up with. You know what the Rabbanan hold when it comes to the things that's confused? Did it take root before the Rosh Hashanah, take root after Rosh Hashanah? The Rabbanan say, I have to go to another pile of grain and take Meiser from that on this. And I have to have grain from last year, I have to have grain from this year, and I have to take separately. I would have to pass like the Rabbanan. If I would say that, just like Kol Ein Bila, I would say he would hold like the Rabbanan, I have to get an outside solution. So Kamashman, Allah Reb Shimon Shizuri. So he tells me, no. The Allah Reb Shimon Shizuri, that we could resolve this without doing any of finding other grain that Meiser wasn't taken yet, and then take on both. V'yashmin and Hanitart. If it would have said both of those, Hava mina kasha d'shmol ad d'shmol, then I would have said that there's a contradiction. So kamashmon akol helachacha gemar peri. That's why it says that the solution that he's giving you is not because he holds it, because he holds it. You follow the gemar peri. V'yashmin akol helachacha gemar peri, which that was the most obvious. That seems to resolve everything. So Hava mina fil tu of nami. Then I would have included more than what he says it by. He's only talking about by legumes. Kitnias. Kamashmalan halacha Reb Shimon Shizuri b'may depalig. Coming to tell me, halacha like Reb Shimon Shizuri, that we only go after Gemar Peri about what Reb Shimon Shizuri is arguing with the Rabbanan about, and not all food items. Right? Okay. The Gemara says, L'shamina and Hani Tarti. Why doesn't it just say Hakol Halachacha Gemar Peri, and then Halacha Reb Shimon Shizuri? Because and then we would figure out that you go after Gemar Peri. You go after the Gemar Peri. What would I think? I would think everything. So we say Halacha Reb Shimon Shizuri. That is not everything. If you say Halacha Reb Shimon Shizuri, I would think Bila. You say we don't. Bila means mixture. We say we don't think Bila. We think it's because of Gemar Peri. So Lakol Ein Bila Lamali. Why does it have to say that? You know what? I would have figured out that he doesn't hold of Bila. He doesn't hold of mixture by saying that you go after the Gemar Peri. But what I wouldn't have known is that he does hold of Bila by liquids. So the point of the Ein Bila, except for wine and oil, is not the Ein Bila that there's no mixture. The point is, except for wine and oil. That's the Chiddush of that.
Is it just wine and oil? Other liquids?
I don't know if it's other liquids. I would assume the same thing applies to other liquids, but we're saying wine and oil because of Meiser. The original Meiser was wine and oil. I'm not sure.
But what's it saying? There is no Bila
Except for wine and oil. It's like for liquids. So he's asking, what about other liquids?
It's funny if you take Daniel's question, you might say, except in the case where wine and oil mixed.
Oh.
There's no Bila.
Uh-huh.
I don't
That's
think
funny.
that's what it
No,
means.
that's not what he meant. Okay.
Could you sort of double dip the Orla and my Rishon?
Arla
Oh, that's just for grain.
no, Arla is
Oh, wait.
You mean Meiser Rishon, Meiser Ani maybe. Arla is fruits of a tree that you have to wait 3 years before you can take them, before you can eat them or use
Doesn't
them.
that coincide with?
Now,
my
it turns
solution?
out that I'm dating the tree
Mhm.
3 years from planting the tree. And then I have years of Shemitah, which have nothing to do with, they're not dependent on when you decided to plant the tree. They're the world calendar. So I
Oh,
have 1, 2, 3. So yes, I may have planted a tree in any one of those years, and it's going to be affected by my Rishon, but it's a separate.
you can't
right.
give it, you can't use it for both.
So Arla, things that are Arla, don't go under the category of Meiser. That you don't take Meiser from that. You can't. You have to destroy the Arla. Once the tree is at a certain age, let's say it's 5 years old, so then I'm going to be doing Meiser, rabbinic Meiser from those fruits. Now, which Meiser depends on which year. Right. Okay, but not which year of the tree, which year of the. No, Arla is not. Arla, Truma goes to the Kayan. Arla is the forbidden fruit of the first 3 years.
You have to destroy that, or you just.
It's Nisrafim. Officially, it's Nisrafim. I don't know Chutz La'aretz, but officially, Arla is Mina Nisrafim. That's what it seems. Okay, we have time. Let's go further. Tanya, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Yaimer, we can do Shabbos. Mishatarach Erev Shabbos. Tanya, Rabbi Yossi Aglili Yaimer, Rabbi Yossi Aglili taught, Ba'aspacha migarncha mikvecha. When you gather from your granary, it's the garnchai. I'm saying granary because it sounds like granary, but it's the threshing floor. But in other words, you're going to leave the chaff and the sticks, stalks on the floor. And from the wine press or oil press, I'm not sure what it is. Yekvecha is specifically a wine or oil. Does it say? I think it's wine. See, this is interesting. The grain and the grapes, they all grew. What happens is when it rains, so it gives it enough energy to give forth fruit. Once it gives forth fruit, then we consider it like it's done. So when did that rain take place? It took place last year. So if there was a bud, a blossom, a bud of fruit, that means that rain from the previous year was, if it blossomed before Rosh Hashanah, that means that the rain of the previous year was effective. And that's it. We're considered like it's done. After that, it's going to go. It's fine. And the same with reaching a third in the grain. The grain has to reach a third. That once it reaches that third, and we consider it like, okay, that you made it. Okay. So it grows from the water from the previous year, and so therefore the mices from the previous year. Also, everything that grows from the previous year, that grows from the water from the previous year, the miser is taken from them. What are we saying? Yotzi Yerakis. This excludes vegetables. Why? You know what's interesting about vegetables is that you can keep watering them and they'll continue to give forth another vegetable. It's not like you have to cut it down or there's only one season. The vegetables will, as they grow, they get another tomatoes or something. I don't know. They'll grow. You want to say tomatoes or fruit. So they'll continue to give forth as you water them. So they don't grow only from last year's water. They grow also from this year's water. So therefore, you go basar lekita. What matters is not, the big deal was last year's rain. The big deal is just when you pick it. This year's water. Rabbi Akiva, that was Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yossi Aglili are the contemporaries. Rabbi Akiva may be considered his teacher. It's probably like a Talmud Chaver. He's not a real student of Rabbi Akiva. He's if you look on the chart, you'll see he's not being in the same side, same line. That in contrast to Rabbi Yossi, that's a different Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. There's Rabbi Yossi Aglili. Rabbi Akiva Aimer ba'aspacha migarnchem yikvech. Rabbi Akiva takes the same pasuk. When you gather in from the threshing floor and from the press, ma gern b'yekav miyuchadim shegedelim al reiv mayim. Most water is used for grain and for the what's it called where the grapes grow? No, I'm saying where they grow, a vineyard. Use most water, but you don't go out there with a bucket and start watering your grain. It really needs to rain. It's called stay lavan. It's a white field, but white in English, stay lavan white, because you don't have trees there. And it could be it looks white also, but basically there's a lot of sun. There's no shade there, so the grain is gone, and it really just has to rain. It has to. Otherwise, no one's going out with a bucket and watering, which in contrast to vegetables, which someone would go out with a bucket and water. So it's only gedelim al roiv mayim u'masarsim l'shana shava, and then the meiser is taken from the previous year. Afkol shegedelim al roiv mayim masarsim l'shana shava yatzi yiraker shegedelim al kol mayim. It's coming to exclude vegetables which grow from all water. Why? Because I can also use a bucket. I use rain, but I can also use a bucket to get water up from the well and bring it over. And that goes with the following here. So the Gemara says, "My binayu." Very nice. Both of them agreeing that Yirakas are basar lakita when I take it, and grain is basar hivia shlish or chanata or when it blossoms. So what's the difference? So we say that this type of onions, they grow very small, and also pula mitzri, that's going to be the difference. That if you grew it for kitnius, then you have to follow when it was planted, when it took root. Those are going to be different. Now, who holds what? Who holds what? Well, if you consider kidneys, because I had two, because I have two possibilities there. The Gemara now says it could be nayo. That's the difference between them. The Tanan. Let's take a look at this source, and then there's actually two possibilities of learning this Gemara. We have Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Aglili, and we're going to say one is going to say this and one is going to say that, but then we have another source that switches it. The Tanana was taught, let's say you didn't water it for 30 days before Rosh Hashanah. So, we consider it last year's. And if that year was the 6th year, we don't consider it because you didn't water it, so we don't consider it growing more in the 7th year. We consider it that it grew in the 6th year. But if you did water it, then asurim b'shviyas and misasam l'shana haba, then it's considered shmita fruits and it would be asur. Now, who holds what? So Rashi quotes, Rashi has one source at the beginning and then he quotes another source. In the second source, he says, Rabbi Akiva would hold of this Mishnah. It explains like this, that if you didn't water it 30 days before Rosh Hashanah, then we'll consider it like a field that's dependent on the rain. Because it doesn't use all water, it used the water from the previous year, which that's what we said was the rule by grain and vineyards. So it's going to go from the previous year, we're going to consider the 6th year. There was a difference between roiv mayim and kol mayim. And however, Rabbi Yossi Aglili, that doesn't make that difference between roiv mayim and kol mayim. What was his difference? He just says meishana he just says which year it is. So we're going to say I'm not sure how Rabbi Yossi Aglili is going to do this, but for Rabbi Akiva, if I did water it, then because the ground is still going to be wet in the following year, because usually these things don't need a lot of water. So when I do water it, it stays moist for a long time. So it's considered like it's growing even after Rosh Hashanah with the moisture that's there, and it's going to be growing on Shemitah, which would consider it Shemitah fruit. The question is why Rabbi Yossi Aglili doesn't agree to that. Okay, let's leave it. Rashi gives two possibilities backwards and okay. Shukayach, have a good Shabbos, everyone.